one of these chats before, welcome. I'm super excited to have you. My name is Meg. I am part of Power to Fly's virtual hosting team, and I am really excited to get started and introduce you to this amazing organization and some of the great team members of theirs that are joining us. So before we jump in with questions, I just want to highlight a couple quick housekeeping rules for everyone. We really encourage our audience to participate. It makes these events so much more dynamic and fun. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can turn your cameras on if you'd like to share your faces with us. No pressure if you don't feel like it, that's fine. You can also come off mute to ask a question, whether or not you've got camera capabilities, no worries. If you do come off mute, you are going to show up in the live recording of today's session. So if you have any kind of privacy concerns, not a problem. Just know that you can still participate either by sending your comments or questions into the group thread, or if you have, you want to stay anonymous for whatever reason, you can DM me directly. Just pick my name from the drop-down menu instead of sending the message to everyone. I will raise your questions and keep you anonymous. Like I said, this chat is being recorded, so everyone that registers for today's session, whether you join us for 5 minutes, stay for the full 60, or if you missed today's session but you had registered ahead of time, hi to the future watchers, everybody will get an email in about 1 to 2 business days that'll have a link to where you can rewatch this recording. We're also streaming this to our YouTube channel, so if any of our amazing Teachers Pay Teachers team members today say something just mind-blowing and you have to share it right away with a friend or a coworker, you don't have to wait the 2 days. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. We've got 2 distinct ones. It's our main, and then we've got a Chat and Learns channel. And within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of today's session, this video will be posted there. So you can share that. You can also check out a whole archive of our past chats on that YouTube channel, or you can check them out on our website where all of our videos live. So definitely take advantage of those resources. Like I said, we do have a couple different YouTube channels, and I very much encourage you to keep up with us on social. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And we share really great content there, links to blog posts, all kinds of cool stuff, as well as telling you when events like this are happening. So I definitely encourage you to check us out on social. Please feel free to take pictures or video as we go and share to social. You can tag us. And share the wealth and share the love to let people know that you are learning with Power to Fly today. As we jump into our introductions, first up, I'd like to introduce you to Sherelle. Sherelle is an engineering manager at Teachers Pay Teachers, which is an online platform with a mission of empowering educators to teach at their best. Sherelle leads teams that are focused on constantly improving the TPT developer experience and enabling high quality and high velocity product development. She enjoys learning about and giving talks on topics like web performance, tech leadership, and creative coding. So welcome, Sherelle. We're so happy to have you today.
Hi,
oh, go ahead, sorry.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sherelle is joined by Carly Stambaugh. Carly leads data science and data engineering with Teachers Pay Teachers. She unlocks the power of data from ingestion to insight, helping product and business teams in their work to unlock the collective wisdom of teachers. She loves math, music, and all things Mario. So welcome, Carly.
Excited to be here.
We are so happy to have you, and I'm loving having somebody else with the wild hair color join us today. That's really great.
Nice.
Up next, we also have Kwame Thomason. Kwame is the VP of Engineering with Teachers Pay Teachers. He works with the engineering management team to build a culture of technical excellence, engineering empowerment, and inclusion. In his free time, he enjoys music, traveling, and the never-ending search for the perfect toffee recipe. Awesome. I don't think I've ever even tried toffee. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Well, you have to try Terry's Toffee, a quick plug there. I don't have a steak, in case you're wondering. Anyway, yeah, super excited to be here and talk about one of my favorite topics, which is learning and development. So yeah, happy to dive in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anything that anybody would like to add to their bio? Anything you'd like to share with us about, why you're so excited to host or to chat on this topic today? Anything at all?
I can share that. I've shared a version of this talk with a bunch of different companies, and it's always been super well received. And I always walk away learning something new, most importantly. So yeah, excited to talk about something that's been a really important part of our culture for a while.
Great, super exciting. Okay, so before we get into our questions for the day, I want to share with you, obviously Teachers Pay Teachers is sponsoring today's chat and they are hiring. So what I'm showing you now is what the Teachers Pay Teachers company page looks like on powertofly.com. Now I'm going to share a link with you to where you can check this page out for yourself. What you're going to find here is a couple different things. So as we learn more about Teachers Pay Teachers today, let's say you love what you're hearing and you want to get some more information. You can click on their company info to learn more about the organization. You can click on events to see past events that Teachers Pay Teachers has partnered with us to host, as well as upcoming events that they'll take part in, like today's virtual chat, our virtual job fairs, our mini summits, all that kind of stuff. That's where you'll go to find that info. And then obviously, if you are a job seeker, the most important part of this page to you is going to be the open jobs. I see they've got 18 roles up currently. So when you click on that open jobs, that'll take you down and you can see all of their roles. You can search within them to see what would fit you best. But one thing I want to highlight for you is that when you go to this page at the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you will see a big pink follow button. What that's going to do if you click that follow button, it's going to put you on the TPT Follow Network. Now, basically what that does is it acts like your friend at the company. So it's going to tell the TPT team that you are interested in working with them, even before you file it, complete an application, and it's going to keep you informed of when they post new roles. So it's a really great way to make sure that you stay updated on what they've got going on in the openings that they have. It's especially a great tool to use if you check out their open roles like today and don't see anything that really speaks to you or that would really value your skill set. So if it's something you're interested in, I absolutely encourage you to click that follow button. It is a really great way to make sure that you don't miss an opportunity with an amazing company. So as we go on into today's chat, I just want to talk briefly about some of the themes that we're going to try and cover in this session. We've developed these, been in working with TPT to see what their presentation today was going to talk about, but also based on the questions that y'all submitted ahead of today's event. So I want to be sure that y'all understand that we want you to feel like you are really driving the conversation today. We're going to try to get to these based on the questions that were asked in advance, but if you took time out of your day to spend with us, then we want to make sure that the time that you spend here is well worth it. So if you are here and you're live and you are excited to learn about TPT or learn more about the subject of today's chat, please feel free to chime in. You can come off mute to ask questions. We have dedicated Q&A time, so I'll make sure that that's super clear. If you have questions during their presentation, you can either save them for the Q&A portion or you can put them into the Zoom chat. I'll be keeping track of them there. And as always, you're welcome to either DM me if you've got privacy issues or whatever. I'm also here if you've got any kind of technical issues as well. I'll try and do what I can to help you out. So over the course of today's chat, we are going to talk about some actionable steps that you can take to introduce yourself as well as your team to the idea of continuous learning and build it into your culture. We'll also talk about how to get this solid understanding of the benefits that a continuous learning culture will provide to you as well as your team. And we'll also touch on some resources to impact both smaller and larger teams, since sometimes the challenges presented by both are a little bit different. So as we go into the presentation, I'm going to start sharing the TPT deck that they're going to be talking about. And then later on after that, we will jump into the questions that y'all submitted. So I'm going to go on mute and turn the floor over to the TPT team.
All right, thanks so much, Meg. So just a moment, I'm gonna share my screen, just a moment. All right, can you all see that? All right, great. As Meg mentioned, we'll be taking questions at the end, so get that notepad out. But yeah, diving in here. So today I'm going to talk about how Teachers Pay Teachers built its culture of continuous learning. As I mentioned before, I've talked to so many people about what we're doing here, and this is a model that a lot of other companies have started to copy. So really excited to share what it's done for us and what it can do for you. But before diving in, I want to talk about why learning at work matters in the first place. So really, we learn to keep up with an evolving world. So I want to share some examples of just how quickly tech changes. So if you think about VR as one example, around 6 years ago, Facebook acquired Oculus, and that really sparked a wave of renewed excitement in virtual reality. Before that, you know, VR was really a pipe dream, and not so much that it didn't exist at all, but VR on the level that we know it today was really a pipe dream. Now several major tech companies are investing literally billions just that quickly, right? If you go back even further, uh, continuous delivery, a best practice that has become so known across many software organizations, didn't even exist, surprisingly. Continuous delivery did not exist around 10 years ago. If you released features bi-weekly, that was actually considered moving fast 10 years ago, right? And now some companies are shipping multiple releases per day, right? And that has implications for everyone involved. Everyone has to sort of relearn how to work to an extent, right? Then the final example I'll share, this one is super familiar, right? 15 years ago, the iPhone didn't exist, right? And now you're not even really taken that seriously without a mobile strategy, at least for some businesses. Um, and many teams are choosing to build for mobile first. So 15 years ago, we didn't have the iPhone, and now some teams are only building for iPhone, right? At least at company inception. So that's not even to mention a bunch of other trends, right? Like the rise of social media, emerging markets on the internet, the evolution of digital privacy. You could throw crypto in there and a bunch of other things since I created this slide. But things change quickly, is the point. Things change very quickly. So there's actually a term for this. There's an acronym. It's called VUCA, and VUCA stands for volatility. The world is constantly evolving. Uncertainty. It's highly unpredictable. Complexity. It can be very difficult to understand. And finally, ambiguity. Sometimes the meaning is unclear. And you might be surprised to know that I actually put this slide together before the pandemic. But over the last 15 months, this has even become more true, right? So really, we learn because we're in a VUCA world. Things are changing so quickly. We learn out of necessity. We have to keep up, right? And really, this is something that uniquely affects knowledge work. So if you think about agriculture, it's not so much that you don't have to continually learn, but there's a set of practices that you can rely on that really just work. Similar with, if you think about the industrial age, again, it's not so much that you don't have to learn, but you just don't have to learn quite as much to keep up. When you think about being a knowledge worker, really it's about ownership of knowledge and using that to produce valuable goods and services. And in that world, anytime there's a new development, you really have to rethink all of your assumptions to keep up. So that's why learning matters so much and how it uniquely affects knowledge workers. So just to recap, as companies evolve continuously to remain competitive and keep up the pace of innovation, especially if you think about a company full of knowledge workers, really all of us have to learn continuously as our employers adopt new strategies, new technologies, and best practices, right? And in a VUCA world, really the teams that learn well also perform well, right? So that's why learning is so important. That's why, learning is so important to me even. The other really cool thing is that it's been demonstrated that learning is a good use of time. So these are some stats from the LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report from a couple years ago. And they did a study that compares heavy learners to light learners. And heavy learners are people who learn 5+ hours per week. So what they found is actually really interesting. So what they found is that heavy learners are 47% less likely to be stressed at work. Heavy learners are also 48% more likely to have found a sense of purpose in their work. And finally, heavy learners are 74% more likely to know where they want to go in their career. So not only do we learn to keep up with an evolving world, but we learn because it's good for us. We learn because it's really good for us, right? So next I want to talk about what makes learning at work in particular so challenging, right? Because I think it's easy to sit back and say, oh, we should spend more time learning. But practically speaking at work, you're always thinking about how to use your time best, right? So what makes it so challenging when you talk about learning at work? Well, a really, really big thing is that people are struggling to make time. So here's some stats from the LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report. So 74% of people want to use spare time at work to learn. 94% of people would stay at their company longer if it invested in their career in that way. But the interesting thing is that the number one reason employees feel held back from developing is a lack of time to focus on growth, right? So that's one of the big struggles here. People are just struggling to make time for learning at work. The other interesting thing, though, is that companies are actually struggling to engage employees in the programs that they're offering. And this is from a company called PageUp Research. So about 70% of companies have trouble engaging their employees in learning programs, just in general, which is basically every company. 75% of employees actually invest their own time in work-related learning. I think that's something most of us on this call can relate to, investing our own time in work-related learning. And finally, this stat is really staggering. Employees spend up to 5 times more time on self-directed learning than company-sponsored learning. So the bulk of the burden of learning is still falling on people in their free time, finding ways to learn on their own, right? So there's really a missing piece of the puzzle here, right? It's clear that the way we work is evolving, the way we learn is evolving. People are saying they don't have enough time at work to learn. Companies are investing time in learning programs. There's a disconnect here, right? So what's the missing piece? So I think the answer is that engineering leaders and leaders in general must evolve too by seeking out different ways to engage people in learning experiences, and also making sure we make time for talent development, right? Make sure we make time for learning at work. So one area we've been exploring a lot at TPT is social learning, and perhaps that's part of the answer. LinkedIn and PageUp have some data to support the notion that social learning could be the answer. So 70% of employees under 40 want social learning experiences. 87% of all employees say that sharing knowledge is a critical part of the learning experience. So basically everyone is saying that social is something they want out of learning. Yet only 34% of companies are actually investing in social learning, right? So perhaps that's that missing piece. People want more of that community aspect when it comes to learning, but most companies just aren't thinking of it that way. So perhaps that's the missing piece. So I want to talk about a little bit more evidence for this idea that social learning can be really powerful, especially at work. So the 2019 State of DevOps report offers a clue here. So this is a report published by an organization called DORA, DevOps Research and Assessment. And their focus is really promoting an evidence-based approach to DevOps best practices. And to deliver on that promise, they conducted the single largest study on DevOps best practices to date in the industry. And over the past 6 years, they've collected over 31,000 survey responses. Actually, that figure is probably outdated. It's probably over 50,000 at this point. And they've done this across a range of companies, a range of industries, a range of countries, companies of vastly different sizes. So really, high quality, diversified data. And their goal really is to identify the best practices that elite performers are using that other companies are not, right? So they have this big data set and they're trying to figure out what are the elite performers doing that other companies aren't. And the cool thing is that their ability to just do research is so good that Google actually acquired them a couple of years ago just to do research for them. Luckily, we still have access to the wisdom they have, but this seems like a pretty credible source, right? So anyway, let's see what they have about spreading best practices. So this is a quote directly from the report. So high performers favor strategies that create community structures at both low and high levels of the organization, likely making them more sustainable and resilient to reorgs and product changes. The top 2 strategies employed are communities of practice and grassroots. So the report goes on to define communities of practice, and they essentially are groups that share common interests, could be in tooling, language, methodologies, and essentially they get together to learn and spread their knowledge and expertise, right? So that sounds pretty social, right? So maybe there's something here. So sharing a little bit more data. So DORA's data shows that elite performers are relying more on communities of practice than any other technique, right? So this sort of creating these sort of knowledge communities is the favorite approach by elite performers, right? So the data indicates that there's something here, right? So I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about the history of communities of practice. And I'll gloss over this section, but happy to take more questions about this at the end. So the term communities of practice was coined by a social anthropologist named Jean Lave, and also a computer scientist and educational theorist named Etienne Winger. And they were studying apprenticeships across various cultures in an attempt to rethink rethink learning in social, cultural, and historical terms. So touching on this really quickly, they studied a bunch of different groups: Liberian tailors, Mayan midwives, and even US Navy quartermasters. And they found all these commonalities in the way that you sort of spread knowledge, especially knowledge that's difficult to codify. But the idea is that this approach is really applicable across a range of use cases across space and time. Even if you look at medieval Europe, ancient Greece, you'll see a version of communities of practice. So going back to this definition, it does seem to apply to a broad range of use cases, right? Just a group of people sort of exchanging knowledge that can apply to a lot of different groups. So I want to just take one more moment just to clarify exactly what we mean when we talk about a community of practice. So really what distinguishes a community of practice from other groups is that the primary purpose really is personal growth and building expertise. You learn as part of lots of different groups, like a professional network, but a community of practice really exists solely to learn. So that's one of the distinguishing factors. Another distinguishing factor is that members self-select in based on interests, right? So it's not a manager saying you're assigned to this group or anything like that. It's really, what do I care about learning right now, right? The group is held together by shared passion and commitment. And finally, it lasts as long as people care about it, right? There isn't a defined start and end date. It's as long as people are getting value out of it, right? So the really cool thing is that as I was sharing that, some of you may have had this thought, but the really cool thing is that, guess what? You already have communities of practice, at least informally springing up. Lots of companies, what this looks like is just reaching out to someone who's kind of interested in something similar and forming that connection either to get work done or just to explore curiosity a little bit more, right? This could even be just in the form of a Slack channel or like a formal periodic lunch and learn, but these sort of exist at lots of companies, right? So I want to talk about why it's important to even talk about them formally, though. And the idea is that it's really important to nurture communities of practice to get the most value out of them. And I'm going to talk in a moment about how we're nurturing our communities of practice, but that's really why it's important to sort of reason about it formally. So I want to read you this quote from Etienne Winger. Although communities of practice are fundamentally informal and self-organizing, they benefit from cultivation. Like gardens, they respond to attention that respects their nature. You can't tug on a cornstalk to make it grow faster or taller. You shouldn't yank a marigold out of the ground to see if it has roots. You can, however, till the soil, pull out the weeds, add water during dried spells, and ensure that your plants have the proper nutrients. So that's what we're going to talk about in a moment. How do you really nurture communities of practice? How do you cultivate learning within your organization? Cool. So next, transitioning from theory into concretely how we're using this at TPT, I'm going to walk through a couple examples of communities of practice and how they've worked out for us. So the first example I'm going to highlight is something we call learning guilds. So learning guilds are really a group of people with shared interests. And learning guilds are typically focused on learning priorities that are set by our engineering management team. So the idea is that we're kind of identifying what's most important to learn as an organization, and then encouraging people to form groups around those. Learning sprints typically last every 2 to 3 weeks. And during every learning sprint, there are reading assignments and exercises. And then at the end, you almost do a retro. You come together, you talk about what you've learned, and you have a presenter assigned to really make sure that you have a high quality discussion. And here's a quick example schedule. So, during the week, you're kind of doing sprint work or, however your company organizes their time. And then on Friday afternoons, you kind of block off time for learning, get together with your group, or on off weeks, maybe you're just reading. But the idea is that you have like a dedicated block of time just devoted to learning. I want to touch on how we think about learning priorities as well. So the idea with learning priorities is that you really want to explore the gaps and weaknesses that you want to turn into strengths and core competencies as a team. And there are a bunch of examples here, right? So hiring needs is a great example, where maybe you have a group of people come together and study leadership in order to help them grow into leaders at the company. Technical strategy and industry trends. Maybe you're exploring transitioning to a new architecture, but you really need to block off time to learn to really know what the right path forward is. Product performance and quality. Maybe there are some issues cropping up in the products you're operating that could benefit from leveling up the team. Feedback channels, things like engagement surveys, one-on-ones, et cetera. And there are plenty of other inputs I'm sure you can think of, but the idea is that as a team, you want to take a step back and say, essentially where do we want to level up, so that you're making sure you're focused on the sort of highest leverage learnings. So just to explain how this works, sort of big picture, and I'm going to go through this section pretty quickly, but just to explain how it works big picture, this is sort of the feedback loop we've sought to create. So we get together, talk about the learning priorities we want to focus on, form groups around those learning priorities, go about the business of learning, organizing learning into learning sprints, and then finally sort of measure the value that you're getting using survey. We tend to use surveys here, but the idea there is that you just want to make sure people are actually getting something out of the program, and if they're not, basically you want to course correct. And we found this to be incredibly effective here at TPT, this sort of feedback loop we've built around learning. So that was the first type of community of practice. Next, I want to talk about the second type of community of practice. And this is something we call project guilds. So these are small group projects formed around individual interests. So learning guilds were more about, what are sort of the highest leverage things for us to learn as a team. And project guilds are more, what are people most curious about learning, and how do we get more practical hands-on experience with it. So the idea is that, you come up with a project and make forward progress on Friday afternoons, almost like a skunk work style project. And the really interesting thing is the backlog is usually comprised of low priority tasks, right? So things that we probably, like on a team's backlog, they probably won't get to, but they can probably serve as a really good learning opportunity for someone. So that's typically where these tasks are coming from, although sometimes they're just projects that people come up with that still have some relevance to TPT. So anyway, this is really our answer for self-directed learning. And the example sprint looks really similar here, right? So during the week, you're focused on sprint work, and then Friday afternoons you block off time to focus on the project guild. So quick thoughts on sort of what sorts of projects tend to work really well for project guilds. So a question we like to ask ourselves is, given infinite time, what additional work would we prioritize, or what impactful projects are likely to be prioritized by any existing team, right? So what impactful projects, emphasis on that word, but impactful projects that can also be really great learning opportunities. So a few quick examples: these could be product experiments that a team just doesn't have time to do. These could be internal tooling improvements, right? That may not be prioritized otherwise. These could be refactors and product health tasks that people don't have time for. They could be risky projects. These are just a few examples. But really the key is to figure out that intersection between sort of an impactful project and a great learning opportunity for the team. So covering the feedback loop here really quickly, it looks pretty similar. You construct the backlog, form teams around ideas that people care about, organize into learning sprints. Demonstrating value here really looks like shipping and demoing, right? What did you create that's tangible that you can share? And then the nice thing is that, once you're demonstrating something for a customer, so to speak, it gives you a really nice sort of endpoint to the project. But then it also demonstrates that, project guilds are kind of a great tool for learning. And the really cool thing, and I'll talk about this in a moment, is that, some of what we shipped is actually, turned into real projects. So kind of converted from being learning projects to something that's on the team's roadmap, which is pretty cool. So a few examples from the past couple years here at TPT. So we had a leadership learning guild. A group of leaders spent several weeks studying basically emotional intelligence and a few other leadership principles, which led to tangible relationships for that group, and really learning at all levels of the organization, from junior engineers all the way up to engineering directors. So that was highly successful. We had a delivery guild. So members of the product development team spent a few months studying software development best practices. And later, we actually introduced a few of these metrics into the way we think about team health. So that's another example of really tangible benefit we got from this program. Another really great example, there was an engineer on the team excited about exploring service mesh, which is, if you work in distributed systems, a pretty common approach to service-to-service communication. But anyway, we were kind of figuring out whether it was right for TPT, and there was an engineer on the team particularly excited about it. And so he used project guilds as a way to explore it and kind of push it forward. and build a proof of concept. And ultimately, that's something that we've decided to embrace here at TBT, but it would not have happened, or at least not as quickly, without someone kind of raising their hand during learning time and saying, hey, this is something I want to explore. So this is about learning, but it's also about just doing your best work as a team. So we're getting lots of value out of it, even beyond learning. So a few other observations I want to share that are a little bit harder to measure. So greater team cohesion, especially when we went to more of a distributed setup. You have your sort of project team that you're working with day to day. But then you also have, if you're participating in our learning and development program, you also have a learning guild, right? So you have another sort of group of people internally that you're seeing every single week and having some interesting conversations with. And, especially for new people that we've brought onto the team, this has been a really important part of our culture. The second thing here is greater recognition of internal experts. So sometimes if you're someone who knows a lot about a particular domain, you don't always have a natural forum to share your expertise. Now with learning guilds, you do. You can either choose to lead a guild or you can choose just to participate. But either way, you're having that natural forum to really have these deep, either technical discussions or discussions about another topic with other engineers. The other cool thing, and I touched on this earlier, is that we saw learning at literally every level of seniority. So this isn't just something that junior engineers, for example, are getting benefit out of, but everyone, in fact, gets a lot of value out of, comparing notes with other engineers and exploring topics with other engineers. The fourth thing I'll mention is that, in general, we have a much better understanding of how to use learning as a tool to do better work. So at this point, if there's an opportunity, a learning opportunity we want to pursue as a team, by default, everyone sort of thinks, oh, this might be a good fit for our learning and development program, right? So it's actually become a really useful tool that people increasingly understand how to use to do better work, which is really cool. And then the last thing I'll touch on is, I touched on this earlier, but less stress, greater sense of purpose. These are definitely things that we've seen from our learning and development program, and things I would hope that you see too. So I will leave it at that because I know we have a number of questions to get to, including about this. But yeah, in a moment, happy to take questions about this or what it's like to work at TBT. But with that, happy learning, everyone. Thanks for listening. So why don't we move on to Q&A?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Kwame. That was really informative. I very much enjoyed the breakdown on the different ways this could be effective. So thank you for that. Okay, so we did have a lot of really great questions that were submitted prior to today's event. And like I said earlier, we want to make sure that y'all feel free to really share questions that come up to you during the presentation. I see we did have a couple people that asked questions during. So I want to make sure we get to those, but we're going to start off with some of the pre-submitted questions so that we make sure we touch on some of the really top of mind points of today's subject. So for our first question, this person asked, how did you formalize this idea within your organization? So it's really kind of interesting to me to see how it was taken and how the idea developed. But let's talk a little bit about that process.
I'll take this one. So yeah, this was probably 2 to 3 years ago. We wanted to try sort of formalizing our approach to learning and development. We had a few sort of informal communities of practice, although we didn't really think about it that way at that time. And really, when we sat down and thought about it, we considered things like book clubs and some of the other typical approaches. But in talking to people internally, we'd just seen mixed results with those approaches and didn't want to just try something that we knew would just kind of produce mediocre results. So we took a step back and kind of thought about, what worked, what didn't work about different approaches we've seen in the past, and came up with somewhat ambitious plan to devote around 10% of time to learning and development. And I think that really was the key, just blocking off the time. And then, we added a little bit of structure, and, we spent, a couple weeks planning it, but we didn't overthink it. One of our principles here at TBT that we rely on is really charter, course, and iterate. So we landed something pretty basic at the beginning, just starting with a a few different groups focused on leadership, programming, and systems design, and then sort of iterated from there based on what worked and didn't. So that was really the inception. Anything, or Carly?
Yeah, does anybody have anything they'd like to add to that?
I'll just add that I've been at TPT around 5 years, so have been at TPT as our learning and development program has grown, and learning has always been something that's been really important to TPT and a large part of why I joined, but then able to see how, as this program has helped us, as me as an engineer and now as a manager, to help the learning of people I manage, has been really great to have like a system in place that matches like a really important part of our culture of we learn and grow together. So
I love that. We did have a question during the presentation. Sandra had asked, does this show a disconnect between the types of learning programs on offer and what employees want? Now, this was fairly early in the presentation. So Sandra, if you'd like to add more context to this question, please feel free. But would anybody from TPT like to talk on that disconnect?
Would you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, Sandra had asked, does this show a disconnect between the types of learning programs on offer and what employees want?
I'm happy to take this one as well. Yeah, I think so, right? And one, as we were sort of designing this internally, I spoke to a lot of companies about how they think about learning and development, and there were a couple things that really surprised me. So one is that most companies actually just weren't, that I spoke to anyway, weren't thinking about this super carefully, and I think there's something there where anytime a company struggles to reason about sort of the return on investment, then they're not going to think about it super carefully. And it doesn't mean companies won't invest at all, but typically they'll sort of use an off-the-shelf solution. And the other thing that kind of surprised me is that even companies with resources many times the size of TPTs were not really operating in a super sophisticated way. So there's one company in particular that I won't name, but I spoke to a member of their learning and development department. It's one of the biggest companies in the world, a company you've definitely heard of. And they have a learning and development program, but they don't really try to map it to what people want to learn, for example, what the company needs to level up on. And they don't really even try to measure sort of the success of the program itself. And that was really interesting to me, and a sign that, we probably needed to think a little bit harder about our approach. But yeah, certainly I think, there's definitely a disconnect between what employers typically offer and what employees actually want, most definitely.
Thank you for that, Kwame. Anything else from Carly or Sherelle before we move to our next question?
I think that disconnect is present in a lot of companies. And I will say that one of the things that really appealed to me about TPT when I was talking to Aaron in the recruiting process is that learning is important to every company, right? Like everybody says, oh, we love to learn as we go. But hearing about the specific intent that TPT puts into the idea and actually allowing time for it, not being like, oh, if you want to learn about that, you can expense a book and read it on your own time. And the fact that it's actually built into our work cycle was really impactful in my decision to come to TPT.
Absolutely. There's definitely you can feel the difference between a company that kind of uses something as like a check mark, like, oh yeah, and then we've got that covered and whatever, and it's sort of an afterthought, versus a company where it's like a very core and critical part of how they do business, or how they use their employees or utilize their employees.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we do, I know we have a bunch of pre-submitted questions, but we do have a person in the chat that wants to ask a question. So Sumia, I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. If you'd like to come off mute and ask your question, you're more than welcome.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sumaya, and I have been kind of passionate about teachers TPT for a while, just on my own, checking out your website and knowing about the work that you do. And my background is in marketing, and I worked in book publishing for many years, and I marketed to educators and the educator and librarian market. So I am curious about if you have input for your marketing department, how the marketing department, if you know how they are involved in the process of learning and development at work, and what does the marketing department bring to the table that helps your work? That's my question.
Thank you for that, Samaya. Would anyone from TPT like to address this?
Yeah, thanks, Samaya. Happen to be a good person for this one too. So I think the first question was how is the marketing department, utilizing this program, and the second one was how are they contributing to our work, right? So yeah, one thing I didn't mention. So this program started within engineering, and it's since spread to an extent to other functions. It's not quite a company-wide program yet, but our product marketing team and PM teams do have like a weekly learning session set up that's modeled after the engineering learning guilds. And then as far as how marketing contributes to our work, can you maybe clarify a little bit?
I think I'm just wondering what the partnership is, because I'm a marketer and that's where my passion is. What is the partnership between product marketing? It seems to be the primary marketing team. The partnership between the product marketing team and, let's say, the engineering team or the data team. How do you guys work together to make each other's work better? And it's primarily the question.
Great question. Thank you for that.
So one thing that I was really surprised, for context, I've been at TPT for about 6 months, but we have product marketing managers, which is something that I had never heard of before, but I think it's a really interesting role, and they are much like a product manager. They play an active role within product development and making sure that the kind of voice of the customer is being heard. And having that marketing influence like within the team from the development perspective, I think is really powerful to kind of steer the ship as development goes along. Does that answer your question?
It does to a degree. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to listen to any other input if somebody has it.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is context from one of my teams is our web platform team. So we kind of work with anything front end related. So we do a lot of work with different marketing teams at TPT, specifically our growth marketing team, working with product teams to come together. And something I really appreciate about TPT that I haven't seen as much as other companies is just how collaborative it is, and that it's really built off those relationships with people. So I know anytime I work on a project with marketing, I always learn a ton, whether it's from the people directly or we're learning on something new together, a new technology or a new vendor, we're trying to work together. And that's something I really appreciate, that I often collaborate or connect with people outside of my direct department or team because we're all so passionate about our core mission of empowering teachers. It's really awesome to be able to do that all together.
That's really fantastic and inspiring to hear. Thank you so much.
All right, let's get to one more question from our pre-selected group, and then we've got another person in line that would like to ask a question. So one of the questions that was pre-submitted, this person asked, what kind of challenges do you face in ensuring everyone is utilizing the learnings that come out of these programs?
I can take this one. Sherelle, looked like you were about to jump in.
Go for it. I can add afterwards.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple I'll highlight. So one is making sure that whatever you're learning is sort of aligned with what you're working on immediately. In reality, sometimes you learn things that you won't use for a year or two, right? Which is I think totally fine. But there is sort of this balance between learnings that you can use immediately and learnings you can use eventually. and in that latter bucket, it can be challenging to make space for it, sort of in your day job, so to speak. Yeah, I think the other big challenge is, particularly with project guilds, sometimes it's something where, we just can't make time for it on the roadmap immediately, but which can be a little bit disappointing. But sometimes you'll start off with something that feels like more of a learning project, and then it turns into something more substantial. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to create enough space on the roadmap. So I think that's the other example I would cite.
Yeah, the thing that came to mind for me was, and I think this is great because this is built into our process that Kwame talked about kind of revisiting what happened in our last sessions and kind of thinking about the program overall. But usually what I do with members of my team as they work through their learning and development is make sure there's a healthy balance of, there's a lot of leadership opportunities to teach others and making sure they're balancing that with also learning the skills they want to know. So the great part of our learning and development process is that there's lots of opportunities to give workshops or to lead a guild and do that. But also, maybe encourage somebody who's led a guild to then join a guild maybe in a field that they're not as comfortable with, so that they're getting different aspects of their learning altogether and making sure they're taking advantage of different aspects of the program and what we have to offer each other.
Excellent. Okay. We do have a question from Srijana. Would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Hi, my name is Srijana. I am basically working on UX design and products right now. And in the past, I've had some experience working on a UX project with other teachers where I got to research them for a project that I was working on for a crowdfunding platform. And one of my interests is finding out what opportunities the product design team has at TPT for learning. How do you encourage designers to learn new skills? How do you encourage them to learn new research skills or new statistical skills? Do you have an official mentorship program? Do you have training classes online? What's your structure like?
Yeah, so I know there are a couple members of the design team excited about adopting a version of Learning Guilds. One of them is Julia, our director of UX research, and the other is Justin, our head of design. I don't think they're on the call right now, but anyway, that they're looking at adopting a version of this as well.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Srijana. I'm so sorry. I'm butchering people's names today. I apologize. All right. So one of the things that kind of interested me while we were listening to you talk about this this program, is this mandatory for employees? And if so, what is really expected of them for that, that minimum amount of participation, or that, baseline of how you would like them to participate?
Short answer is that it's not mandatory. I'm tempted. I see someone. You mind if I invite a TPTer that's not on the panel to speak for a moment?
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right, Kevin, I'm going to put you on the spot. I think you're the best to speak for this one.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, this person had wanted to know if the program is mandatory for employees, and if so, what is really expected of each person as a baseline of participation? Yeah,
it's definitely not mandatory. I think we want to get people excited about learning to a point where, they are, happily participating. So we don't require it. That's one thing. And I think we also want to acknowledge, like Kwame was saying, different people learn different ways. So create enough modalities of learning, whether it be the project guild or learning guild, or workshops, so that if you're want to engage with the subject matter in your particular way, you'll be able to find something that really connects with you. But I think we've had pretty high participation. We're constantly iterating and adding new programs to try to reach out to all the different people. So this iteration of this program, we've had probably close to 90% participation across engineering, which is pretty amazing. So I'd like to think that it doesn't need to be mandatory, that if you really create programs that kind of reach out to all the different types of learning, and you can get people excited about it. And find something that they can connect with.
Great, thank you for that, Kevin. I see we have one person raising their hand. We'll get to you in just a moment, Hannah. This person wanted to know, do teams actually schedule time for learning, or is it considered something that is done during your personal time? I know you talked about how it's more of like a Friday thing, but does it ever like bleed over into employees' personal time, or is it really just restricted to like the Friday, Friday project cleanup kind of thing?
I can at least speak to folks on my team, but I definitely encourage them to use the time at work. And I think we want to make sure if people are passionate about development outside of work, I definitely want to hear about that too. And we talk about that during a career conversation, if they're working on an open source project or something like that. But definitely encourage folks to use the time that we've set aside to do that. And not only during the Fridays, but if there are other opportunities as well, in terms of we have some mentorship relationships, or if it's choosing to lead a project that maybe it's more of a stretch opportunity. I think there's lots of different ways that people can find their interest even outside of that, that current learning time. But I think what's special about the time at TPT that I found is that, wow, I don't have to use my personal time for this thing I'm interested in that's going to help me at work. I get to use the time that the company's really invested in and set aside, and I get to do that with my peers, which is super, super great.
Thank you for that, Cheryl. Sorry, go right ahead, Carly.
On my team, so for the data science team, it's a little bit different because there's a very specialized skill set for the data science team, and it's sometimes not something that engineers from other teams are necessarily interested or have the background to be able to participate fully in that. And so we kind of had our own kind of data science learning guild. And recently, one of the new employees was asking about, tracking time or whatever. And he's like, well, do I have to track it like when I spend learning time for the Learning Guild? And I was like, no, I totally expect for you to spend some of your time during the week prepping for the Learning Guild. It's not something that you need to do on your own time. It's part of what we do here. And I fully expect you to take advantage of that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I see we've got Hannah who wants to ask a question. Would you like to come off mute and ask yours?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm Hannah. I was wondering, for your engineering team, have you found that continuous learning in these learning guilds, have they been able to help like back-end developers or front-end developers really round out their full stack skills in general?
I think a really great example in this last round that we did, again, to bring it back to data, there was a big data guild that was actually the data engineers were just kind of like a consultant on it, right? Like it was really driven by engineers that were not data engineers and we're just really interested in learning more about how the big data infrastructure works and that sort of thing. And I think most of them were front-end engineers. So it was a really good example of expanding into other areas.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely encourage. It's been really great when I have people, because I work on more specialized platform teams, that ALF is a great opportunity. Our Eng Learning program is a great opportunity for people to get access to maybe something they've been interested in, but don't really want to make a switch to a team yet, but want to learn from other engineers. And I think either finding somebody specifically or being able to join a guild of other people and not being afraid to ask questions. I think another great part about the learning program is that we're saying, sometimes it can be hard to say, hey, I don't know about this thing, maybe I should. And I think the learning program is a great way to say, hey, we're all learning together here. Even if somebody is more of an expert or leading it, that doesn't mean they know everything about the topic. And also a unique part is that members of the guild themselves lead presentations. So somebody who maybe is just spending the 2 weeks to learn about something is then facilitating a conversation about it. And I really love that, because anyone at any level of seniority can help others learn about things like that, which I think is especially helpful if maybe you're more specialized in front end or back end and want to get experience in a way that's not super intimidating or that's not tied to like very intense deadlines or things like that.
So great. I love that. You're right. It's definitely easier to learn things when you're not on a shot clock. So that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you for that question, Hannah. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
Yeah, actually, if that's okay, as a follow-up, like I think that's extremely interesting that you are able to get that hands-on experience in a very, it does sound like relaxed way, which I think is, I don't know, it's a comfortable learning environment. Are you then ever, like you talked about maybe switching teams and not wanting to go right into like another team, but is there ever like the possibility to pair with somebody from that other team to kind of work on those new skills that you've gained or been following at least through the Learning Guild?
Absolutely. In fact, out of the guild that I was just talking about, we are now kind of partnering closely with an engineer from a product team that was really interested in the inner workings and trying to. We are working together during the process that would usually be like, okay, we're going to hand this off to data eng at this point, but currently we're working together to get through that. By pairing. And I think it's really awesome to see that interest and then also be able to offer that opportunity to get that hands-on within the context of like actual projects that are part of what we're going to produce in our product.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And Hannah, thanks for the follow-up question. That was great.
Thank you.
I know that we have some people I'm sure have a hard end time, but we're going to extend this time just a little bit so we can make sure that we cover some of these great questions that were submitted. So one last thing I want to ask before we talk a little bit more about TPT culture is I want to talk a little bit about the implementation or the introduction of this to our own teams or to our own departments. I know that I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the steps that are involved, as well as maybe how to address it if you don't really have a big budget to account for the time that you're taking up for this program idea.
I can speak to this one. You don't actually need a lot of budget. I think the most important thing to budget for it is the time. So you can just start by identifying some areas that you think would be interesting and useful to the team. Like, so for example, one of my teams, we just started out with a suggestion box kind of idea where everybody came to the table with, this is something that I'm really interested in learning about. And then we synthesized from that, okay, what is the mutual interest in a topic and what is the potential applicability to our work and is there something that we are going to be able to put into practice from this? And from there, just picking some focus areas for the quarter, and then you just lead the group. One person led the group every week, and it would rotate so that you would like pick the particular topic within the larger topic. And it's very budget free.
No, you're right. That's really great. It's a nice way to kind of draw on the skills that you have, or even just the curiosities that different team members have. I think that's awesome. If you're looking to really implement this and need to kind of get buy-in from, let's say, like a supervisor or something like that, are there any kind of basic steps to launching this program or to kind of introducing it to a new group?
Well, one thing I would say that I've seen work really well is literally just sending them this presentation. I mentioned I've spoken to a bunch of different companies about this stuff, and I think it usually started with just someone internally being excited and saying, look at what TPT did. Here's how it worked for them. Here's the benefit they saw. But yeah, use this presentation. It was actually designed for that purpose. So yeah.
That's great. And like we talked about earlier, it's going to be live on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to share this around. All right. So to jump into a little bit more about the culture at TPT, we had some questions that we asked the team earlier and got their responses. So that's what you're seeing on the screen in front of you. I also have some questions that I wanted to kind of put to the team to give us a little bit better understanding of what the culture at TPT is like outside of just this amazing program. So would anybody like to speak to some of the key skills or attitudes that you like to see in a software engineering candidate for your company? Anybody? Feel free.
Yeah.
Go right ahead, Sherelle.
I can start off. Yeah, I think like this as somebody who's excited to collaborate, somebody who's really excited about our mission and excited about how to use the skills they already have, but also continue to learn and grow with their teammates to do that as well. And I think somebody who is really reflective about that, and I think who understands where they are and where they want to go and wants to work with their teammates and with their manager and other folks to get there, and really wants to work on something great that can help educators, are all really great aspects to what would make a great software engineer at TPT.
Great. All right. So we were also asked about the interview process. So can somebody talk to us a little bit about the interview process, what it's like for, especially for junior candidates? Let's start with that, and then we'll go on to the follow-up that was paired with that question.
I can hop in here. So yeah, there are a few different versions of the interview process. The commonalities are really coding interviews. So the sort of classic sort of whiteboarding, or sometimes we use these days we use CodePen or similar tool. We do like a systems design interview as well, and that's an interview where you basically talk through how you would solve sort of a practical problem. So for example, building a mobile photo app, how would you do that? Talk through the sort of product considerations, design choices, trade-offs, and even how you would test and monitor it. So that's the systems design interview. We also have sort of an engineering culture interview where we talk about your experience with teamwork and sort of what motivates you, and your general approach to collaboration. So that's the Eng culture interview. And then for some roles, we also have what we call the product interview, where you basically sit down with a PM and talk through how you think about sort of user or customer considerations.
Okay, so throughout that process, this person had wanted to know, are you open to hiring someone who has worked with a different tech stack, but is still interested in joining your engineering team?
Yes, during our interviews, folks can interview with the language that they're most comfortable in, and I think a really just important part of TPT is that we're not so focused on what specific technology or things we're working on for that reason, but except that it helps us produce what we need to for our mission and what we're building. So definitely encourage folks who are maybe familiar with another stack to they can definitely contribute to TPT in a really meaningful way. And so it's not a requirement to be completely familiar with our exact stack.
Excellent. Now, along those same lines, are there different preferences within teams even for a specific kind of education background? I know that we have a lot of people that go through Power2Fly after they take coding boot camps or do training on their own outside of what their current job might be. So are there any preferences along those lines?
We're more than open to boot campers. So formal CS education is not required. Really we're looking for people who are really excited about improving the state of education using technology. That's one of the really basic requirements. And in fact, we've had a lot of success with apprentices in the past, and are excited to talk to boot campers actually. So we had an apprentice join a couple of years ago who after a few months converted to full time and progressed within the team pretty quickly. And we've seen that model work extremely well, and we're actually hiring apprentices this year too. So yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I do see we have people asking questions in the thread about open roles. We're going to touch on that in just a minute here. I want to talk a little bit about your hiring practices. So there were people asking questions about remote positions or how things are working with COVID and what your plan looks like going forward. Now, obviously, nobody has a crystal ball, and a lot of this stuff changes day to day. But can we talk a little bit about your openness or your attitude towards like remote positions, as well as what that looks like going forward?
I can jump in here. We do have a number of remote folks on the team. Actually, Carly's out on the West Coast. Sherelle and I are in New York. So yeah, we're open to remote. Usually we look for people who really have worked well in a remote environment before, have had success on a distributed team previously, and usually we prefer senior candidates for the remote roles. But we are open to remote.
Awesome, thank you for that. Okay, so before we jump into talking about some of your open roles currently, do you have any advice for applicants when it comes to the resume or the cover letter, ways to make yourself stand out, especially if you don't have like the formal training or have a degree behind your name to illustrate what you can do and what you've done? Sherelle, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I don't have a computer science degree, so this is definitely something I thought about. TPT was my second software engineering job, but definitely something I thought about. I would say take a look at our roles and our pages and our job descriptions, and understand how you might be able to, like, what is unique to you and your skills that might be able to really bring to that team. Often we'll post like what you might be doing on a day-to-day basis. And something that I discovered when I came to TPT, I had experience I didn't even know that was valuable in terms of maybe a new front-end technology that TPT we were just exploring, or that this particular team needed. And so I would say just don't doubt that you might have some experience that a particular role just might need. So really thinking about that and being reflective of where you might be able to really make an impact is a good way to think about it.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, so as we jump in here, I'm going to show a slide that's got some of TPT's open jobs right now. So as you can see, there's a range of opportunities, not just within engineering as well. So would anybody like to speak to some of these roles? Some of them, if any are roles that would work closely with anybody, any TPT member that's on the team, kind of any insight you can give us into some of these open roles would be great.
So Sherelle and I both have 2 open roles on our team that are on this list. And I think what I would say about the tech lead role on the data engineering is to kind of emphasize the opportunity here to be really foundational in the future of the data eng team. We are kind of transitioning from between levels, as all data organizations do, and we are looking for like more forward thinking. And so it's a great opportunity to come in and like mold and help define what data eng will be kind of going forward at TPTs.
Very cool. We do have another question in the thread. Sandra is asking what the TPT definition of senior is. I know that sometimes these terms can vary between companies. Is it maybe like a certain amount of years of experience in the role? Does it depend on the role in question each individually? Can anybody shed some light on that?
I can jump in here. So we have we sort of have expectations at different levels internally that are pretty well codified. And so, and when I say levels, it's it's sort of a common approach used by companies to sort of sketch out what's expected of you as you progress through your career. So above a certain level, you're considered senior at TPT, and Yeah, usually during the interview process, we kind of explore different roles and what your experience is to figure out whether you kind of slot into our definition. But yeah, usually it's people with several years of experience that and also a demonstrated track record.
Cool. Okay, so it looks like we are at the end of time today. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody. I know we ran over a little bit, but I wanted to make sure we got to all of the great questions that y'all had submitted. There were some really awesome ones, so thank you so much. And a huge thank you to everybody that submitted questions during today's event. It's one of my favorite parts. It gets, makes this whole event a lot more personable for people, and it really helps, get you a more in-depth look at this great organization. And of course, I want to say a huge thank you to our TPT team. It was, as always, really a great time to kind of spend the afternoon learning from all of you. And a huge thank you to Kevin and Aaron as well, jumping in with with questions to kind of help us with questions and doing all of the back end work beforehand with this event. It's never just the time you see, there's all kinds of back end work that goes into it. So thank you to everybody. I'm just really, really happy to have spent this afternoon with all of you.
Thank you, Meg, and everyone. This is fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Before we jump off today, I just want to say I hope everybody has a lovely rest of your Wednesday. Good weekend ahead. We're super excited that y'all joined us for today's session, and we've got a lot more virtual events this week, next week coming up. So I hope that you'll join us for some of those. Our resources and our events are always free, so I hope that you take advantage of that. And don't forget, we have our mini summit for June coming up on the 8th through the 11th. Our focus is on Pride at Work. So we'll be celebrating the Alphabet Mafia and learning more about how we can support and grow the visibility of this, this great pool of people that, are making such a great impact on both the world and the workforce. So hopefully y'all will join us for parts of that as well. And yeah, I just hope everybody has a safe and happy holiday weekend, and can't wait to see you guys joining us on more chats in the future. Thanks so much and have a great day. Bye.